Suzy, thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited for our conversation.
I am too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And we have to mention that you and I were introduced by our amazing editor and friend, George. He worked on my book and my journal, and then he also worked on your book with you. Is that right?
That's right. And I couldn't love George more. He's just the best.
He's the best. And I love when he said, "Hey, I have some other women that I really want to introduce you to that I work with." I'm so grateful for you for sending me a copy of your book, Stand in Your Truth: 7 Sacred Truths to Living a Divinely Guided Life. And I received it and I read through it. It's amazing. And I actually have so many notes that I've underlined. But before we dig into your book, maybe you could just share a little bit of your background because you had an interesting career and background, as I shared in the bio, as a
Hmm.
stylist, and then owning your own yoga studio, and now doing this amazing healing work and writing books. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you found yourself where you are today.
As you know, I'm a clairvoyant energy healer and yoga meditation instructor. And I left the stylist world because it was not really fulfilling a purpose any longer. And so I had my yoga certification and decided to open my yoga studio. And there was a room in there to rent, and I just couldn't find anybody to rent it. And my little internal guidance said, it's time for you to start your healing ministry. So I've been doing that for well over 15 years, almost 2 decades. And as we moved into 2020, we moved into COVID. I chose to close the studio because I was not spending enough time with my clients. And I hit the perfect storm in 2020 and pulled back from the world and decided to write this book based on messages that I was channeling and all of my forest walks, things like that.
Yeah. And for those that maybe aren't as familiar or they don't understand what it means to be clairvoyant, can you just talk? I know in the book you share some really interesting examples of when you first recognized that, and maybe you didn't even recognize that you had a gift. Maybe as a child you thought that everybody could see the things that you see, but maybe share a little bit more about what your gift looks like and how it unfolded during your early years.
So, as a little girl, I used to receive kind of these internal messages where there was a voice that would always address me as my child and would talk me through things. But when it really zeroed in was I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And I live in Minnesota, so we have snow. And I used to go and lay out in the snow and just look up at the stars. And this particular night, my neighbors were having a lot of people over. The husband was out for a jog. It was January. And tragically, he got hit by a car and didn't make it. So this night, friends and family were gathering to just show support. And as I was looking over at the house, I noticed this really beautiful stream and circle of light that came down over the house. And my little internal guidance said, that's the angels bringing your neighbor down to just take in all the love and just a giving and receiving of love between the two. And I just remember thinking, of course, that thing or that kind of thing happens. And it was just a really beautiful thing to witness. And as I got a little bit older, I started actually having visitations from souls that were on the other side. And I was communicating with them and ushering them up to the light. And I think the clairvoyant gifts, I'm clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient. So I receive images, impressions, words, apparitions come to me, that kind of thing. And so when I was in my early 40s, it was fairly unfocused. And in the book, I share a story about my dad going through ALS. And this is when I really honed in on working with someone. So with ALS, he lost his ability to speak. And it didn't mean that he didn't try to communicate. But there was one particular day that I was taking him out for a walk. And my dad was the kindest, gentlest man ever, and just such a beautiful disposition through the whole disease. But on this particular day, he was being aggressive and just motioning to go back. And the voice inside of me said, place your hand on his heart and put his hand on yours. And then the voice said, he's afraid to die. And so I looked at him in the eyes and I said, Dad, are you afraid to die? And he nodded, and I could tell that he was getting teared up. And then they said, tell him that you will walk him from this side to the next. And I told him that, and I could just see this sense of relief on his face. And there was another pivotal moment with him as well when it was nearing the end of his disease. And I would be the one that would put him to bed. So I'd sit in his hospital bed or his hospice bed. And again, he would communicate, talk, but I had no idea what he was saying. So again, the voice said, place your hand on his heart and put his on yours. And it was the first time that I had what I would call a soul conversation. So I could understand exactly what he was feeling. And what he was trying to tell me was wisdom about his life, and then he wasn't afraid to cross anymore. And I was able to express back to him how much I loved him and the gratitude I had for him. But these soul conversations are really what are the foundation to my healing sessions. So I feel like my dad was like my first beautiful teacher on this side.
Mm-hmm. I love in the book how you shared so much of your personal life and you shared so many of these stories and how where you are today in your healing practice really just unfolded through all these relationships. But I think one of the things that I just appreciated about you is just how open your heart is and how loving and kind you are to so many people, like including your father, but also Leo and then also Tyler in there. I know you mentioned that during COVID, it was a tough time. Do you mind just talking a little bit about what happened with Leo and how that also changed you and maybe moved you closer to your healing practice as well?
Yeah, the experience with Leo, I had just come back from leading a really awesome yoga retreat in Costa Rica. Leo was one of my daughter's dearest friends. And when we landed from the retreat, there was a snowstorm, a Minnesota snowstorm. So it took us a while to get home. And when we got home, two of my daughters went and my hubby, but one of my daughters remained at home. And so when we got there, she greeted us and we were talking and she said, "Oh, yeah, Leo stopped by and he has some gifts for you. I think he went down to the basement." So my daughter went downstairs and I heard just the most horrific scream come out of her. And she just yelled, "Mom." And I ran down the stairs knowing that there was something very wrong. And as I entered her room, Leo was slumped over on his side. He was not breathing, he was unconscious, and he was blue. So it took me a moment to kind of navigate what I was seeing. My adrenaline kicked in. I told her, "Call 911." And I grabbed him, pulled him onto the floor, and administered CPR. And because of the snowstorm, it took them 29 minutes, I know that from the call log, for the paramedics to arrive. And Leo had accidentally overdosed and he survived, which was just an extraordinary gift. But also, I found in the days and months after that experience, I was having trauma responses from it. And there wasn't a moment that I really wasn't thinking about it or reliving that experience. So then, in the middle of the year, or coinciding with that, we have another dear friend of the family who was also managing opioid addiction. And my daughter asked if I could meet with him and kind of talk through some of his options. And so we met down on our dock and we talked and talked, and he decided that he would go through treatment. And because it was 2020, everything was virtual, even though he was in residential treatment. So he left early. And when he left, I met with him again and I said, "How about if you join my teacher training program?" Just to help him keep on track, because my teacher training program is all about living your best life, whether you teach or not. So he was in my training and we were nearing the end of the training and I saw him almost every day. And at the end of each training, he would walk me to the door, he would help me clean up, he'd walk me to my car and he'd hug me and he'd say, "I love you, Suzy." And on this particular day, he didn't say it. And I did not say it back either. I was feeling weird about COVID. So I didn't hug him back. And the next day, his girlfriend called and said that he had accidentally overdosed and he didn't make it. So that made me just spiral about Leo. And I just felt I had to keep him alive. And so I met with him. Like every week we'd walk and I would talk to him about it. And I could see myself just slipping into somewhat of a depression and also this kind of manic, out of control maternal side. And that's what I write about in the book. Is what finally broke that for me was surrendering. And I remember just getting down on my knees and my forehead on the floor and just sobbing and saying, I don't know how to heal this, but I surrender this. And I'm just asking for this beautiful angelic guidance to walk me through this. And I'm trying to describe how I felt. I felt like I had to control. That was my battle cry, control. Releasing from the control.
Did you feel responsible somehow for keeping him alive?
I felt responsible for Tyler's death because I was the last person to see him, and that I did not intuit it, that I didn't hug him, that I didn't tell him I loved him. And I felt, yes, an absolute responsibility to Leo. As a mom, I looked at him as like part of the family.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I felt this responsibility. But what came forward with the wisdom after I did the surrendering was that is not your job. And to take this away from him would be robbing him of a pivotal life experience. And you need to step back and allow him to live his life.
Yeah. It's true, because if we do believe that we're each here on mission and here to learn and to have our own experience, anytime, even as a parent, when we do that with our own children, we are stealing from them. We are robbing them of the gift of the lesson.
Yeah. And we're imposing that we don't trust that they can figure it out themselves. So I talk to all my parents when they come in with issues with their children into my healing session that natural consequences, as hard as they are for us, are our best teachers.
Hmm.
And by the way, Leo is doing really well.
Oh, I know. I love that. I saw that in the book and I was going to ask and see how he's doing. You talked about surrendering and going into the forest, going into the woods, grounding, and really connecting to God. And I know that even at the beginning of the book, you talk about standing in your truth. And that was a phrase that kind of came in. Tell me a little bit about what you heard and how you knew that you were going to be able to write this book from the time that you spent alone walking in the woods, grounding down and just connecting.
When I was going through all these situations, it was Leo, it was Tyler, it was COVID, it was the depression, I had Lyme disease. So I just was completely disconnected from my body. So I would take forest walks and I would walk for hours and hours almost every day. And I started getting messages and communication with Divine Mother. And what she was expressing is that the world is so out of alignment. We are not standing in our truth, and we are not listening to our body's wisdom, and we're not listening to our divine wisdom because we're so distracted by everything around us. So as I would take my walks, I would get messages from her and I would voice memo them. And then I would sit at home and I was able to develop an outline. And in doing my energy healing work, I'm very familiar with the energy centers, the chakras, and the seven sacred truths align with each of the chakras, and they each have a lesson for us to learn and a truth for us to live within that helps us to manifest and helps us to just be present in our life and present in our world and to be able to heal ourselves. Because when we're in alignment, we thrive.
Yeah. I love the simplicity of the seven sacred truths. So, can we just go through each of these? Because I think it's so helpful to talk about them and also to talk a little bit about where they are in the body, how they connect. And I love the other thing in here is that you have actually yoga and meditations that are connected to this so people can follow along. So it's extra videos that they can do on their own. But let's start maybe just talking through each of these and talk a little bit about how we can apply these lessons to our life.
Okay. The first three truths align with the first, second, and third chakra. And you don't have to know anything about where they are. I describe it in the book, and that's why it's a teaching memoir. I give examples from my life to explain what these really mean and how I applied the truths to get back into alignment. So, the first sacred truth, which aligns with our first chakra, is called divine manifestation. And divine manifestation is all about creating a foundation for all the other truths. So when we look at it from our body and our body's wisdom and our life here on earth, it has everything to do with our essential needs: love, food, water, shelter, all of those things. And when we're rooted in that, and when we create a beautiful and sacred foundation, we can then move on to the next sacred truth, which is divine rebirth, which aligns with the second chakra, which is right in the navel center. And that is all about divine rebirth. So if we don't have a foundation and we're living in scarcity, it's very difficult to believe that we can manifest and we can create different things. So divine rebirth is all about shape shifting and manifesting and recreating your life and having the groundedness and also the vision to recreate. And we rebirth ourselves throughout our lives several times. So for me, the experience in 2020 was probably one of my biggest rebirths, next to when my dad passed from ALS. And when I'm working with people in rebirthing, when they're challenged with it or when they're afraid, I have them remember a time in their lives when they felt their most powerful. And for me, it was when I was a little girl and I used to run around outside in the summertime with my brothers, or my brother. I don't know why I always say brothers, my brother. And I was very agile and I was very athletic, and I used to just love to run around in the summertime, and we would just play games outside. So that's my memory. And when I'm struggling with things, I remember that little girl that used to be able to run around. And the reason why I have them do that is because even if you're thinking about it, you vibrate that, whatever it is that you are feeling and thinking. So I have them shift from this kind of scarcity or fear based into what was your most powerful moment, and then start daydreaming. So that's divine rebirth. But you need to have divine will then along with it, because this is your fire. It's your divine will versus your ego. So when you can surrender into the ego and release all of those small thoughts, divine will comes forward and helps you actually create the life that you're wanting and feel expansive and feel really grateful for what you're manifesting and what you're experiencing. So when you think about it, think, okay, whatever is getting in my way, I'm going to surrender that, and I'm going to awaken myself to all of my potential. And when you look at the elements that attach with each, so divine manifestation would be earth, divine rebirth would be water, so you think fluid and movement, and divine will would be fire.
So, how do people surrender to the ego and really get back into a sense of alignment to connect to that divine will instead? So, instead of us saying, this is what I want, maybe selfishly, maybe just only focusing in on what we think that we want, because sometimes we think we want something, it's really not. And when you
Mm-hmm.
actually are in alignment and it is divine will, it's so much better. So, how can people, are there practices or things that can help them get into alignment?
What I always do when I am trying to bring something forward is I sit in silence again and I ask myself, what is the truth in the situation? How can I be entirely honest with myself about this? And I usually do this exercise where I tell people, okay, so don't be the participant in the situation, observe it through the eyes of the angels. So I always scope out of the situation and I look at whatever it is that I am struggling with honest, open eyes. And I've become pretty fluent with recognizing, oh, that's you. You're getting in your own way, and this is why you're getting in your own way. And I know it's not easy to just say, okay, I recognize it, but at least you can be honest with yourself and know this is what is influencing me in a negative way at this time. And so that's usually what I surrender. And then I ask for divine assistance. I always ask, because that's divine law. Your angels, your guides, spirit won't come in to help unless you ask for that help. And you surrender all the stuff that's getting in the way. So that's usually how I move forward with divine will. And then allowing the beautiful things to come forward without trying to control how they come forward. Because that's the other piece too. When you're so fixated on it has to be this way, that's when you trip up and you get in your own way again.
So true. So true. That control keeps coming up.
Yes, it does. We as human beings, when we get scared, we want to control the situation. And when we want to control, we pinch off our oxygen tank. That makes sense. It's just scoping out, stepping back and saying, all right, this is me. I'm getting in my own way. I'm afraid to let go of it, but I'm still going to do it anyway.
Yeah. And then the fourth one is divine love, which is so needed in the world right now, today.
So, divine love is your bridge between your human experience and your spiritual experience. And everything, all of the sacred truths need to have love infused with them to bring out that higher vibration. And also, when I look at divine love, I look at grace as well. In fact, the title of the chapter is called Has Anyone Seen Grace? And the chapter is all about me walking my dad through ALS. And when I was finally able to see the grace or give myself grace for the situation, that's when all the gifts started coming forward. Because after he crossed, I was devastated and I couldn't find him anywhere. And I thought for sure, with my communication with the other side, I'll be able to find him and I'll be able to communicate. But my grief was so strong that, again, I was just in this little hole that I had to get out of. And it was finding grace for what I went through for 4 years with him, walking him through ALS. And that is the message that I get all the time as well from the angels is offering yourself grace and offering yourself love and vibrating at those really high vibrations. And that can heal everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important. What are some of the things that typically impact people's vibration? What are some of the things they could just naturally do? I know forced walking is definitely one that you and I
Mhm.
share. We both love doing that, meditation, yoga. What are some of the other things that you have seen really help? And then what are some of the things that are just naturally detractors?
You know what I love to do in my classes too? Like when I'm leading teacher training, when we're at the end of teacher training, I have everybody write themselves a love letter, which I don't think people do that very often, but it's remembering who you are as this divine, beautiful, perfect being. And I find myself having to pause many times throughout the day when I step out of alignment of that. And when we're critical of ourselves, we're out of alignment. And I'm always trying to get people to remember that they are love. The essence of who we are is love. And I state that not as an action or not as an emotion, but as the essence and the beingness of who we are. And when we can remember that truth, we vibrate much higher. And it's just, I don't know, that seems to shift me. And then I remember we are all perfect beings. We come in perfect and we leave perfect. So that is something that I do.
That's so beautiful. I love that idea. Actually, I'm thinking that would be a great exercise to do with clients, all of them. And for myself too, to do that with ourselves, because we're so critical and the language that we use is just harmful. And it's just important to intentionally shift that dialogue. So we've covered the bridge. So now we've got the higher level divine and chakras. Tell us more about that. This is definitely where things start to get very interesting.
So these are the truths 5, 6, and 7. Divine transformation is located in the throat chakra area. And so I look at it in two different ways. It's divinity with our speech, how we speak to ourselves, how we speak to each other, what our thought processes are, because I'm a firm believer that our thoughts become our words become our deeds. And if they're not in a vibrational match to love and above, we vibrate lower and we're out of alignment. So, that again, I tell people to think about and be honest with yourself with your mind chatter and recognize when you are speaking poorly to yourself or you're thinking lower vibrational thoughts about other people. Notice when it happens and make those adjustments. The other part of it is divine transformation through our breath. And this is a beautiful thing that I get to witness too is divine light moves into the body through our breath. And what it looks like, because I'm from Minnesota, I see snow all the time. When snow like blows off the roof and it catches the sunlight, there's a spectrum of light in every single snowflake. That's what breath looks like. It's millions and millions of these little particles of light that move through us. And so that's why I do a lot of breathing exercises, which would be pranayama, breath work, because you can pull the light in and you can focus it into areas of your body that require your attention, whether it's physical discomfort, emotional discomfort, or just clearing and cleansing. So a nice breathwork practice is really beautiful.
I definitely agree. And it's such a life lesson and a changer. I always did pranayama and just really have gotten even more into the breath work as I went through the facilitation program. And it's so amazing to be able to see what you can do and transform either emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually with breath work. And it's something that is a gift. Like we have this gift within us that we can use from cradle to grave. It's just this beautiful gift. And we take it for granted so often, but it really can make such a big difference. So, are there any practices that you love to do every day in terms of breath work? I know that you can get benefits just even with a couple of minutes.
I always do grounding breath every day, and I could lead that if you want in the end. But grounding breath to me, it anchors you into your body
Hmm.
because a lot of times when we're not feeling great, we like to float right up and out of our body. So grounding breath helps me anchor in. I love Nadi Shodhana, which is alternate nostril breathing. And I have on my YouTube channel, I've got a bunch of pranayama exercises. So those are two that are pretty easy to do. And like I said, it not only helps us spiritually, but our physical body. It lowers our blood pressure, it relaxes our nervous system. There's a million things that deep breathing and conscious breath do to help heal our body and our spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, tell me about the six and the seven divine truths, because I love where you talk in the book about just the connection to our spirit and that we are co creating at all times with God. So, talk a little bit about these divine truths because I think that they're so beautiful.
So, divine wisdom is located in the space between our eyebrows, the third eye, and that is all about our spiritual sight. And what I love about this truth is that it teaches us that we are not separate from each other, that everything that we are and our vibration is connected with everybody on the planet and every living thing on the planet. And when I think about divine wisdom, it has to be infused with divine love and it has to be infused with divine light. And divine wisdom is also where some of your clairvoyant skills come in. So the more pranayama you're doing, the more awakened that you can become to your divine wisdom as well. And what I love is the phrase I put in there, we all do better when we all do better. And that's very much the truth about our connection to each other. I'm connected to you, you're connected to everything. It's just beautiful. And then when we move into divine light, not only are we all connected to each other, but we are all connected to Source, Spirit, God. And we are one. And when I look at divine light, that's when, again, the phrase comes around that I am of God, God is of me. And when I said before with divine love, we are love. And that's what divine light teaches us. We are love, again, not as an emotion or as an action, but as the essence of who we are.
Yeah. And I think you explained it so beautifully in the book where you talked about the ocean
Yes.
and that if you were to take a bucket and to grab a bucket full of water from the ocean, that
Mm-hmm.
would still be part of the ocean, even though it's been removed and technically put somewhere else. And if you were to fill 10 other buckets, they're all still part of the same ocean because when you pour them back in, they just go back. And I think that's so beautiful because I think so often right now, we forget that we are all connected. We forget that we were all created by the same creator source and that we really are connected. And when we hurt others, we hurt ourselves. And I think that's what we're feeling on this planet right now. It's just can be really painful. So tell me a little bit more about how you view this connection and how we're all really connected and also still connected to a higher source, to God.
Yeah, you brought up the bucket example, and I think of the bucket like our skin, and the essence of God is always within us. And yes, we are all connected. And that is part of the reason why I was guided to write this book, is because when one of us is in alignment, we all feel the impact of that. And vibrationally, our world is fairly out of alignment right now. And like I said, Divine Mother came to me and she was expressing that it's time for us to come together and not Like the lessons that I learned from Leo, not trying to fix each other and tell each other that we're doing it wrong, but to hold this beautiful divine space for each other and divine love for each other and pull each other up instead of pull each other down. So when we're standing in our truth, we are in absolute full alignment. And when I look at this alignment, I know when I'm in alignment, when I'm standing in my truth, I feel creative, I feel powerful, I feel loved. And most of all, I feel this connection to this universal life force. And I feel this like when I have people in my healing room and I have the gift of being able to communicate with their soul and all the layers of all of their ego and all of their issues that they have in their life. It's the purest, most blessed experience I've ever had in a human body, is being able to witness someone's soul and that giving and receiving between the two of us throughout the session. It's absolutely profound.
Yeah, tell us more about what it looks like to work with you.
So if you're coming in for a healing session with me, every session I am doing my best to see where you're out of alignment and how to help you and guide you back into your truth. And I'm never going to tell you you need to do this, that, or the other thing. I'm more than anything listening to you, your soul speak, and I'm listening to your guides and angels. And so it's very interactive. When you come in for a session, I'll take a moment and I'll get you grounded, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. We do a little grounding breath so that you're in your body, you're feeling safe. And then I always send up a prayer of intention, and that's that my mind and ego step to the side and I am channeling guides, guardians, angels, all beings of light. And I'm asking them to speak to me, through me, and as me for the highest and best good of all. And then we begin. And I'll ask if there's anything that I need to know to begin the session. And then I'll ask whoever's on the table, what are you coming in for? And how can we find that truth? And how can you observe yourself as I'm observing you now, like through the eyes of the angels? And how can you find compassion for your journey and be really honest with your situation without judgment and shame and guilt? And so the sessions, they can be 45 minutes, they can be an hour 15. When people leave the session, it's like they just left all of their backpacks of like all of the concerns and challenges. And there's this beautiful clarity that comes from the sessions. And there's beautiful clarity that comes through with the images and the words and all of the things that I see. And the vibration is always high. There's never any lower vibration that comes forward, because when you're on the other side, everything is love and above.
Mm-hmm.
So it always has a positive tone to it and a way for people to step into what they want to be doing and expand.
Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. And if people do want to work with you, Suzy, and get a copy of the book and just learn more about you, what's the best way that they can find you?
So on my website, it's suzyschaakyoga.com. If you want to book a healing session, it's on the healing tab or on the healing page. I am on Instagram and Facebook, Suzy Schaak Yoga. I also have a YouTube channel that has over 100 yoga and meditation videos. And so that would be the best way to reach me. And there's also, if you want to contact me directly, info@suzyschaakyoga.com. You can actually reach out and I will respond.
It's amazing. We'll include all those links in the show notes. And the final question that I ask everyone is, what does it mean to live the width of your life?
I love this question. For me, I think it comes back to the lessons I learned from my dad, because he walked through ALS with such grace and never complained. It was just like, this is my journey and I'm going to make the most of it and make the most time with it. So what I learned from him and what it means to me to live the width of your life would be living and loving fearlessly. And when you live and love fearlessly, it doesn't mean that I'm not afraid. It just means that even though I am afraid, I continually find a way to live in my truth and move forward anyway.
Beautiful lesson. Thank you so much, Suzy. I appreciate your time today and just continued success to you as you bring so much light into this world.
Thank you so much for having me. I think you are just the greatest, and I appreciate being on your show.
Oh, thank you. And I do encourage everyone to get a copy of this book. It's just so beautiful. I just felt so good reading it. I read it in a couple sittings, like you said. It seems long, but it's such a page turner. And I love all the journal prompts and additional stuff. There's just so much guidance in here. And it helped me be really reflective as I was reading it. So thank you.
Yeah, and that is available on my website too. And yeah,
Wonderful.
so it's teaching memoir, journal prompts, and yeah, yoga and meditation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Susie. Have an amazing day.
Thank you. You as well.